please rise in body or spirit and let's sing. And I mean, let's truly sing as per our new allowances, but with a mask on. So, as you like. And the first hymn is 361.
Oh, this is nice. Get to sing. Yay!
Let us open with the words of Reverend Christian Schmidt, titled, "Let Us Wake Up." Not just from this Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed, let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality, that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which all of us are part. We must stay woke, in the words of our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our country. So hello, everyone. I'm Tom Phillips. I'm a member of Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Manhattan. Take my mask? That's right. Speakers are allowed to take their mask off. Yes, so welcome to UUFM today. We welcome all with a warm heart and an open mind. Whatever your religious background or lack thereof, whatever your job or your past, whatever your race, gender, or age, whether you're gay, straight, bi, or queer, whatever your physical abilities and disabilities, you are welcome here. Unitarian Universalists work to stay woke in our lives, to be alert to racial prejudice and discrimination as practiced in all ways. I extend a warm welcome to all our visitors and guests. We invite you to sign our guest book in the narthex on that welcome table. On that form, you can request a complimentary subscription to our newsletter. Our greeters and I will be available after the service if you have any questions. Our announcements for today were scrolled at the beginning of the service on slides, but there is one very important announcement I want to repeat. Today is our annual meeting, okay, of the entire congregation being invited will be today after service at 1 o'clock, but online. There will be no in-person meeting here, okay? So we want everyone to take off, or maybe stay here with a laptop and go to our regular Zoom address, and you should be able to then find the meeting at that point. Now, Mark is going to put on that one slide that was showing earlier, and the key thing is that you need to go to the link UUFM.net/calendar/2022-annual-meeting, okay? So the next to the last hot link there at the bottom. All members are required to sign in prior to the meeting, okay? So this assures that we have the minimum number of members joining to be a quorum for the votes to be valid. So actually the sign-in is also virtual, but live, well, virtual. And through that link, you'll find another link, the one shown at the bottom, that goes through a form where you sign in. So if you're sitting at home and there's 2 of you who are members, you each need to do that. Yep. And then that will be the list that in the old days we would do with pen and pencil, pen and paper in the back, so that we are sure we have a quorum for all the few key votes that are happening. Okay. If you have any questions, please see me after the service. We're going to have Pastor Isa do some other announcements at this point. Okay, and then we'll do the you know what.
So hello, everybody. I'm Pastor Isabel Call, and it's my honor to serve as the minister of the congregation. Can you hear me okay? Some shaking heads. I wonder if the mic could be turned up a little bit. All the way up. All right, I know what I'll do. Hold on. All right, see if this makes a difference. Can you hear me in the back? Little wiggle hands. And then maybe also we could enable the captions. Are they working on that? Yes. Excellent. So we actually didn't see the slides of the announcements this morning, but there are some in your order of service, and we have, they come out in our weekly announcements too. So that's a great way to get on our email list. You can keep up with what's going on. So as we arrive in this time and place, let us awaken to the true history of this land. The state of Kansas is historically home to many Native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others, and it is the current home to 4 federally recognized Native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan holds this land within a context of ongoing settler colonialism and the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. So may we wake up and stay awake to these truths, which are so consistently hidden and ignored.
Thank you, Pastor Isa. And now in our usual tradition, we're going to light the chalice. And we have Chris Bailey helping with that. And in the words of Reverend Suzelle Lynch, the fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice, awaken to the work of compassion, awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we have lit here guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living things in its holy embrace. And now in the service, we have time for all ages with Sandy Nelson.
Well, that didn't go well. Clearly laughing is a lot of fun for me. And laughter just feels good. It's just wonderful. And a few weeks ago, there was a song that was part of the service that was a simple song, and it was lovely. The phrases that we're pretty familiar with were, "Where do we come from? Where are we going? Oops, what are we? Where are we going?" And this song, does anybody remember the video? It was wonderful. It was really, really spectacular. However, Zoom managed to caption the music and the lyrics in a way that made me laugh so hard. I mean, there was like, that was the simple phrases, right? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Who are we? Where are we going? Something like that. It was so simple, so simple. But words, the captions showed up and it was like, Hollywood is burning, there's a fire truck down the road. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was hilarious. I was sitting in the back row and I laughed so hard. I finally had to close my eyes because I was just reading the captions and it was hysterical. Catherine, my middle daughter, gave me a sharp elbow in the ribs, was like, Mom, chill. Okay, well, I thought it was hilarious. So I thought, let's laugh, let's have fun today, let's make fun of ourselves. But not of that same video, because that video was really lovely. So I thought, okay, we'll recreate that, because technology is not always our friend, and it was fun. This morning I was a little worried because of no microphone and no captions, but we got it okay now. But it turns out it's kind of hard to do that, because Catherine and Lily and I tried to recreate that experience, and it's really hard. The process of doing it was rather funny, but actually getting it to have goofy captions was nearly impossible for us, and not as funny as the original. So that all went out the window, and I decided that today instead, we're just going to have some fun, read a silly poem, one of our family favorite silly poems. So now, if Mark can figure out how to get the slide up there, we're going to read one of our family favorites by Shel Silverstein called Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout Would Not Take the Garbage Out. And we'll see if the captions can handle me speaking this kind of fast. Are there any captions? Can captions happen even? See, recreating this stuff is really quite difficult. So if captions can happen, then we'll have a funny thing. If they don't, the story or the poem is funny on its own. Okay, so read the captions, see how close we get. Let me know afterwards if anything funny happened. Okay, are we ready? I might read kind of fast, I might not. Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. She scoured the pots and scraped the pans, candied the yams and spiced the hams. And though her daddy would scream and shout, she simply would not take the garbage out. And so it piled up to the ceiling: coffee grounds, potato peelings, bananas, brown bananas, rotten peas, chunks of sour cottage cheese. It filled the can, it covered the floor, it cracked the window and blocked the door with bacon rinds and chicken bones, drippy ends of ice cream cones, prune pits, peach pits, orange peel, gloppy glumps of cold oatmeal, pizza crusts and withered greens, soggy beans and tangerines, crusts of black burned buttered toast, grisly bits of beefy roasts. The garbage rolled on down the hall, it raised the roof, it broke the wall. Greasy napkins, cookie crumbs, globs of gooey bubble gum, cellophane from green bologna, rubbery blubbery macaroni, peanut butter caked and dry, curdled milk and crusts of pie, moldy onions, diced up, dried up. Okay, I don't need my glasses. Curdled milk, crust of pie, moldy melons, dried up mustard, eggshells mixed with lemon custard, cold French fries and rancid meat, yellow lumps of cream of wheat. At last the garbage reached so high that finally it touched the sky, and all the neighbors moved away, and none of her friends would come to play. And finally Sarah Cynthia Stout said, okay, I'll take the garbage out. But then, of course, it was too late. The garbage reached across the state from New York to the Golden Gate. And there in the garbage she did hate, poor Sarah met an awful fate that I cannot right now relate because the hour is much too late. But children, remember Sarah Stout and always take the garbage out. Did we get anything? So, what was it? Tell me. Oh, you are sour cheese. Oh my goodness. Anything else? Hens? Okay. So anyway, thank you. I had a lovely time just through the process. Wonk. I'm so sorry. And I hope you have a lovely day and take serious the meeting afterwards. But know that it's fun too. Let's roll.
Okay. Here at UUFM, the offering we receive on Sunday morning goes to a special organization each month. This month, the recipient of our Helping Hands donation is the Fairy Godmothers. Now, I should point out that on the online and printed order of service, it gives another name. Which one is that? Boys and Girls Club. Also a great recipient, but they're not the one for this month. So the Fairy Godmothers provide grants of up to $800 per person to local women needing assistance with things like vehicle repairs, dental care, minor home repairs or maintenance, and other essential expenses. You can donate online or by going to uufm.net, then clicking the donate link and choosing the particular fund to which you want to contribute. If you're here in person, you can put your offering in the basket in the back. And if it's not designated for anything else, it will go to Fairy Godmothers. I'd like also to invite you to use this time to share your joys and sorrows this week. So during the offertory, you can pull a little piece of paper from the chair in front of you, down at the bottom, and write down your joys and sorrows. And if you're with us online, you can go to the chat, the traditional chat in Zoom, and write down something you're joyful about or something that's a concern in your life. Okay. And with that, we'll go to the offering.
Thank you so much, Renee. Here comes the sun. Oh, well, I am very glad to be here. I'm glad to be arriving. Is everybody here? Did we make it here? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. So let's take a moment to arrive, not just physically, not just with our singing voices and our listening ears, but also with our hearts. Let's become aware of how we're here together, those of us in the room and those of us joining us online, and maybe even we can stretch our imaginations to the people who will watch this video in the future, invite them to stretch their imagination to us right now. We're here together, sharing this moment of joys and sorrows. So I'm going to share some of the joys and sorrows that I know about in our community, and then I'm going to invite Sarah Desmet to share the joys and sorrows that have come in from the people online. So we have a joy from Betty Banner. She shares, our son Eric has been selected to be a candidate for the position of senior minister of First Universalist Church in Denver. So, congratulations, Eric. I know I and maybe others are celebrating with Ketanji Brown Jackson as she prepares to be the newest Supreme Court Justice and the first Black woman to serve in that role. It's a joy today. And, I think I might go ahead and invite Sarah to share joys that have come in and sorrows, and then I'll move to the sorrows I know about.
Well, Mary Beth wants to share.
Oh, and Sarah, give us a moment. You're still muted. Try again.
Should I try? Can you
No,
hear
I
me?
still can't hear you.
I've unmuted myself here.
No, I'm sorry. Well, that's interesting. I can read what you're saying. I just can't hear it.
Well, let me see if I can make the closed captions work.
We can hear you on Zoom. The people on Zoom can hear you.
And
Well, Sarah, why don't you read the joys and sorrows that have come in, and I will try to read them after you.
well, Mary Beth wanted to thank the UUFM choir for singing at John's celebration of life. It was wonderful and joyful, she says.
Mary Beth Reese wanted to thank our choir for singing at the memorial for John. It was beautiful and joyful. I know many of us loved being there. Were there any more, Sarah? Oh, okay, thank you. So I know in addition to joys, we have sorrows on our hearts this morning. We are grieving with Ukraine and all those who are physically and emotionally wounded in this war and in other wars. Closer to home, I remember Lynn continues to learn more about her cancer diagnosis and treatment, and she is preparing to begin chemo at the end of this month. Lynn plans to fight like hell and is grateful for all our support. So Lynn and Lauren, we are sending you light and love, and we'll wait to hear how we can help. And then a joy, combined joy and sorrow. COVID is waning right now, and we're feeling safer being together, but it still continues to affect people. And so just close to home, our guest speaker a few weeks ago, our friend Ann Wiesner, director of the UU Women's Federation, she's struggling with COVID. So just wanted to name, it's still part of our community and still causing us a lot of trouble. So I know that there are other joys and sorrows in your hearts. So let's hold some space for all of these, a moment of silence together. Amen. Blessed be.
Well, before we hear the sharing by Pastor Isa, there's a reading I'd like to give, which is by a very special person in the past, Dr. Martin Luther King. And it helps us to think about awakening, to see what's going on. And the title of his speech here was, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." And Dr. King presented this as the 1966 Ware Lecture held at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. So King said, "Let me say that I'm happy to be a Ware lecturer and to be part of the great names that have been in this lectureship. It is a real privilege, and I can assure you that it is a real honor to be in the significant lectureship. I would like to use as a subject the church remaining awake during a great revolution. I'm sure that each of you has read that arresting little story from the pen of Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. One thing that we usually remember about the story of Rip Van Winkle is that he slept 20 years. But there is another point in this story which is almost always completely overlooked. It is a sign on the inn of the little town on the Hudson from which Rip went up into the mountains for his long sleep. When he went up, the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down, the sign had a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States. When Rip Van Winkle looked up at the picture of George Washington, he was amazed. He was completely lost. He knew not who he was. This incident reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that he slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountains, a revolution was taking place in the world that would alter the face of human history. Yet Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. One of the great misfortunes of history is that all too many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change and yet fail to achieve the new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution. Please rise in body and spirit as we sing hymn 1018. 1018 from the paperback version, "Come and Go With Me." Come
There'll be freedom in that land.
There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. Freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. That land.
All right, thank you all. You know, when we get to that land, it still won't have perfect technology, but it will have really good people doing everything they can to enjoy being together. That's what matters. So, there are many reasons not to sleep through a revolution. I'll give you a few. First, sleeping through the revolution is a waste of a good life. When Rip Van Winkle stumbled groggily into town, he must have heard of a recent election. But if someone had asked him who he voted for, he wouldn't be able to answer, since he'd never voted in his entire life. Not only did he not know who George Washington was, he didn't know he could have had a voice in choosing him. He hadn't had an opportunity to learn and grow, to make decisions. He had lost not only his youth, but the gift of insight and agency bestowed upon people who stay awake as they age. Second, another reason, the revolution needs us, each of us. As I understand it, Rip Van Winkle lost at least one of his best friends in the war. Could that have turned out differently if Rip had been more present to his friend, alongside him in battle to warn him of dangers, to nurse his wounds? And could the revolution have been more successful if Rip and all the other idle opt-outs he symbolizes had shown up for it? The literary critic and lecturer Oliver Turle points out that the name of the pub may have changed to represent the shift from one George to another, but life for the residents of the village is largely the same as it was before. In the story, Rip's son, now grown up, is Rip's splitting image. He's even named after him. The next generation is much the same as the last, end quote. When we play hooky from the revolution, we are depriving the revolution of self-actualized, changing people. And we're ultimately depriving the revolution of its collective actualization. So the existence of this story suggests that there were many people who slept through the American Revolution. But we don't need the story, we have all the proof we need in its legacy. The more noble intentions of the Declaration of Independence still fail to be realized, and many of the grievances against the king are now rightfully held against our federal, state, and local governments. Just like King George, we do not, as a society, honor the equal rights of people to pursue or build their capacity for full, free lives. And many of our laws are made without the voice of the people. Voter suppression is rampant. Free migration into and across these lands is hindered. Swarms of officers harass our people. Now they're police officers rather than British military officers, functioning as standing armies in times of peace, kept among us not by a king, but by a poorly monitored bureaucracy, which grew out of the institution of chattel slavery. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution, except maybe the chance to wake up for the next one. In the years of dialogue and debate that followed the Revolutionary War, values we now hold to be self-evident were enshrined in the Constitution, but others were ignored because even the founding documents and truest intentions of the founders of our current institutions do not represent the best of humanity. They are the products of society, not God's, and humans. We live to grow and change. Our governance should not be enshrined in words any more than it should be enshrined in monarchs. We need dynamic governance. That means we need to show up and keep showing up, not just to play our parts, but to change how all the parts fit together. A little Unitarian Universalist history. Both Unitarians and Universalists were among the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. At that time, differences between the two prophetic religious movements seemed immense. Unitarians had grown up out of the Puritan tradition, and they were flush with the resources of the Boston merchant class. When the Unitarians and the other Congregationalists had been splitting up and arguing about who would keep the lovely old buildings, the Universalists and many other groups had peeled off or sprung up organically among lower income communities, building their own way forward. The two groups, Unitarians and Universalists' theologies were somewhat compatible, but their class backgrounds clashed. Eventually, though, we would consolidate to become the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA. We finally awoke to the many values and strengths we have to share with each other, and we came to trust that we could share them better with the world together. The Unitarians had a somewhat solvent infrastructure and a deep-seated trust in humanity. The Universalists had an unshakable faith in love and the ability to connect heart to heart with diverse people. So 71 years ago, 1961, the birth of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. Now, what else was going on during that era? Yeah, the Civil Rights Movement. So 1963, over 1,000 UUs participated in the March on Washington. 1965, Selma, this was the focus of a service a few weeks ago. 500 UUs participated in the protests, over 140 of them UU clergy, and we lost some of our own in the violence. In the words of Reverend Mark Morrison Reed, the intensity of the experience transformed UUs. The consensus about racial justice sharpened. The level of commitment rose. While Unitarians and Universalists had been promoting integration and equality of access since the 1940s, Selma signaled the seriousness of the UU concern for racial justice, end quote. So that brings us to 1966, when Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at our annual General Assembly. Now, why would he be cautioning us about sleeping through the revolution? Weren't we there? So in 1967, riots throughout the country changed how race was being talked about in the country and in Unitarian Universalism. A gathering of 33 African American UUs spun off of a larger mixed race gathering to share with each other their own experiences of race and Unitarian Universalism. Over the next few months, this caucus grew and they clarified an agenda. They believed that in order for Unitarian Universalism to be a sustainable home for African Americans, there needed to be African American UU leadership and African American UU spaces, and that would require money directly administered by the people it served. It was, as Reverend Morrison Reed says, a paradigm shift away from integration and toward Black self-determination, a change for which the UUA was ill prepared. You could say the UUA was just a little bit asleep during the revolution. The story of the next few years in the UU world is long and complex. For those not intimately involved, it played out in large part at the General Assemblies of the UUA held each summer. The caucus, the Black Caucus, ultimately secured a pledge of $1 million of funding from the UUA for African American-led UU organizations to begin their work. But then the following year, a crisis in UUA bookkeeping forced a drastic reduction of funds. The discussion was put at the bottom of the General Assembly agenda. Opposing this inversion of priorities, Black UU leaders and some white allies tried to interrupt the stodgy agenda of the General Assembly, but they ultimately walked out in disgust and dismay. After a few years of attempts to reconcile, a significant proportion of African American UUs gave up and left. So I wonder if you all have heard this story before. Well, a couple of people are nodding their heads, but I'm glad to share it with others because it's not really a part of our consciousness, and I think it's important that we talk about it and have more ease with the truth and more ease with the discomfort of the truth. When I talked to our convener, Tom, about this service, he admitted he hadn't heard the term woke before a few years ago, and he hadn't actually used it before putting together this service, and it's not a word I use a lot. So together we Googled it. So woke is chiefly US slang, meaning aware of and actively attentive to systemic injustices and prejudices, especially those related to civil and human rights. Here's an example sentence from US Representative Barbara Lee. We have a moral obligation to, quote, stay woke, take a stand and be active, challenge injustices and racism in our communities, and fight hatred and discrimination wherever it arises. Okay, here's another example sentence from Anonymous. He took one African American history class and now he thinks he's woke. So I grew up as a Unitarian Universalist in the 1980s and 90s, and I hadn't heard this story that Reverend Morrison Reed calls the white controversy over Black empowerment. But it was slowly fading into consciousness. Books were being published. Individuals who had left with broken hearts had found healing, and they sometimes came back, if only for an afternoon, to share their stories. Individual white UUs, more and more, started waking up to their unearned privileges and the true reasons behind our lack of diversity as a movement. Various curricula helped small groups start talking about the history of racism in the United States and the ways they might begin making meaningful reparations in our own communities. People of color continued to join our congregations, as they always have, and continue to have difficult experiences, but they also found ways to stick around longer. Some found their way into leadership, and some found each other. We came to understand that our Association of Congregations had slept through the revolution, perhaps, but we need not sleep through the next one. When Black Lives Matter erupted 45 years after the 1967 race reckoning, the UUA had more capacity to center racism in its agenda. The demands of the leaders in the 1960s for African American UU leadership and space, they were gradually being met. At my first General Assembly in 2017, I was stunned to be surrounded by 4,000 people, many of them white, talking openly about white supremacy as a feature of our culture, not just the domain of scary skinheads. Together, we admitted that we were beneficiaries of an unjust system, and we committed to work to change it. We committed through voting to fund POC-led work. We committed through singing. We committed by showing up for workshops to open our minds. And I felt in my body the power of a large group of people with a shared purpose. This was what waking up felt like. I've been readying my mind for a long time, but it became real through making a commitment with others. I honestly believe in the potential of this small religious community to mobilize and participate in meaningful social change. Do you all? Yeah, I see some nods. Do you want to make those nods bigger maybe? Use this as an excuse to move around? Okay, so I think we can do it, and it starts with clarity about our shared purpose. And it starts with healthy, authentic relationships. Relationships across difference, which is going to be true in every single relationship because we're all really different. Being woke is not a permanent thing. You can take a class in the history of a group that's not your own, and maybe you can wake up, but to stay woke, you have to keep showing up, especially if you're insulated from the difficulties that our society throws at people. It's easy to fall back asleep for some of us, but don't. Keep showing up. The UUA General Assembly is happening again this summer, the last week of June, and we will be there. We have 3 delegates who will be gathering here in Manhattan to participate virtually. I'll be in Portland, Oregon in person. Thousands of UUs will join virtually and in person, and we're breaking ground because this is the first time it's a fully multi-platform GA where we're including all kinds of people who can afford to go to Portland, people who can afford all of that time to take off, and the other people who will be dipping in virtually. So I'm looking for leadership here to host screenings, of events and to host discussions of what we're learning at GA. This is an opportunity to show up for our larger movement and to be a part of the ongoing awakening. This month, Saturday, April 30th, is our regional assembly for the Mid-America area. It's a smaller version of GA for UUs living near us. It's all virtual, and it's just from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Our keynote speaker is C.B. Beal, and they will be talking, their talk is "The Glass is Refillable: Pandemic Exhaustion, Lifelong Faith Formation, and Preemptive Radical Inclusion." What I love about these gatherings of UUs is that they manage to have a mix of business and spirituality. And so, I mean, it's just incredible to be together with people in person or virtual and have that woven together. I mean, our theology is one of active engagement. So it is spiritual to come together and make decisions. So UUFM will be at Regional Assembly. That actually here will be in this room at Regional Assembly. But you got to put it on your calendar and register. Registration is sliding scale. It's a great opportunity to dip your toe in. Okay, so this afternoon, the real deal is here, our annual meeting. It's all on Zoom. Now, there's nothing controversial about our agenda today. As far as I'm aware, a brief introduction or update on the work of the racial justice team will be our main explicit connection to collective liberation, but we have lots of implicit connections. We are clarifying our shared purpose. We're practicing making decisions together, expressing gratitude to our leadership, and embodying our commitment to spend time and resources together. Our leaders have spent 2 years keeping this community strong, and we've stayed connected in nearly impossible circumstances. Not only have you showed up, but you've laughed with each other. Our renewed mission to be a diverse, evolving spiritual community acting for a better world is alive. Today's task is the gentle work of showing up and voting yes for our future. In the days and months ahead, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. In future congregational meetings, we will be voting on new specific actions to make this a better world outside our walls. We'll decide whether to affirm, as an 8th UU principle, that we are committed to accountably dismantling racism and other oppressions. We will decide how to make our solidarity real and to make reparations to the Kansa and other people unjustly removed from land. We will be doing these things, but only if we also show up today to prepare and to elect our next round of leaders. So please come, show up, wake up, stay woke together. Let's all rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
All right. To recant some of the words of the Beatles, the sun is coming. It's been a long, cold, lonely winter. And here it's been a smoky morning. It feels like years since it's been clear. But the sun is coming. We are waking up. Let's stay woke together.
May it be so. Please stick around and chat with each other. We'll need to clear this room soon for OWL, but you're welcome to gather in the narthex and the Alsop room. And then make sure to get some lunch if you're coming to the congregational meeting.